The longest book in the New Testament was not written by an apostle, not by Peter, who walked on water, not by John, who leaned against Jesus at supper, not by Matthew, who left a tax booth to follow him. The longest, most detailed, most carefully constructed account of the life of Jesus Christ was written by a Greek physician who, as far as I know, never met Jesus during his earthly ministry. His name was Luke. Paul called him the beloved physician. He traveled with Paul on missionary journeys, survived a shipwreck in the Mediterranean, and sat in Roman prisons, taking notes. He was almost certainly a Gentile, which would make him the only non-Jewish author of any book in the New Testament. And the 2 volumes he produced, his Gospel and the Book of Acts, account for roughly 28% of the entire New Testament by word count. More than Paul wrote, more than any other contributor. But what makes Luke's Gospel stand apart from the other 3 is not its length, it is what he buried inside it. Luke was not writing a biography. He was building a case assembled by a detective. He interviewed eyewitnesses. He pressed for details the way a physician presses for symptoms before making a diagnosis. He traced every story back to its source. And when he was finished, he had preserved material that appears nowhere else in Matthew, Mark, or John. Nearly half of Luke's Gospel is unique to Luke. The prodigal son, Zacchaeus, in the sycamore tree, the Good Samaritan, the criminal on the cross, the road to Emmaus. If Luke had not gone looking for these stories, they would have been lost to history. And here is what almost nobody notices. Luke embedded a cipher inside his Gospel, a single Greek word that appears at exactly 4 pivot points, 4 moments where the entire narrative hinges, and when you line them up in order, they reveal something so precise, so deliberate, that it cannot be an accident. The word is SEMERON. It means today. And once you see where Luke placed it, and who receives it each time, you will never read this Gospel the same way again. Luke opens his Gospel unlike any other writer in the New Testament. Matthew opens with a genealogy. Mark opens mid-action, with John the Baptist shouting in the wilderness. John opens with cosmic theology. In the beginning was the Word. Luke opens like a historian filing a report. Here is what he writes. Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile a narrative of the things that have been accomplished among us, just as those who, from the beginning, were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word have delivered them to us, it seemed good to me also, having followed all things closely for some time past, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, that you may have certainty concerning the things you have been taught. That prologue is written in some of the most polished Greek in the entire New Testament. Scholars who study ancient literature have pointed out that it mirrors the style of the best Greco-Roman historians. Luke was not writing casually. He was deliberately placing his account on the same shelf as the most trusted historical works of the ancient world, and the word he chose for his purpose is extraordinary. The Greek word is asphaleia, translated as certainty, but the word means more than intellectual confidence. Its root carries the idea of ground that will not shift beneath your feet. Stability, firmness. Firmness. A surface that holds when you put your full weight on it. Luke is telling Theophilus, and every reader after him, what I am about to show you is something you can stand on. The name Theophilus itself is worth pausing on. It means lover of God or friend of God. Some historians believe this was a specific Roman official, possibly a patron who funded Luke's research. Others have noted that the name functions almost like a dedication to every reader. If you love God, if you are searching for God, this book is addressed to you. Luke built it for you. He investigated it for you. He arranged it for you. And how did he investigate? Luke tells you himself. He followed all things closely and consulted those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses. The Greek verb he uses for his own research, parakolotheo, does not mean casual reading. It means to trace carefully, to follow alongside, to track a story from its source. In ET, this is a man conducting interviews, comparing accounts, pressing for details, and some of what Luke records could only have come from one source. His birth narrative contains details that no bystander could have provided. The angel's words to Mary, her internal response, her private visit to Elizabeth, her song. Luke records that Mary treasured up all these things, pondering them in her heart, and then he repeats the phrase almost exactly later. His mother treasured up all these things in her heart. That kind of intimate detail, the interior life of a young woman carrying a secret too enormous to explain, points strongly toward the conversation with Mary herself or with someone very close to her. Luke, the careful investigator, seems to have sat with the mother of Jesus and listened. That is the kind of writer who is taking you through this gospel, not a second-hand summarizer, a man who went to the people who were in the room when it happened. Now, once you start reading Luke with this lens, a pattern emerges that runs from the first chapter to the last. Luke is not simply recording events in order. He is building an argument, and that argument is carried by one Greek word placed at 4 strategic moments. SEMERON. Today, the first SEMERON appears at the very beginning of the story. In the announcement of Jesus' birth, an angel appears to shepherds in a field outside Bethlehem, and the angel says, "For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord." This day, not someday, not eventually, today. But notice who receives the announcement. The priests in the temple did not hear it, neither did Herod in his palace. Shepherds, the working men on a hillside, doing a job that most of their society looked down on. In the first century, shepherds were considered untrustworthy as legal witnesses. They could not testify in court, and they are the first human beings in Luke's gospel to hear that the Messiah has arrived. And Luke is establishing something from the very first scene. The today of God's rescue does not start at the top and work its way down. It starts at the bottom, with the people nobody thought to invite. The second SEMERON lands in Luke chapter 4, and the setting could not be more charged. Jesus has returned to Nazareth, his hometown. He walks into the synagogue on the Sabbath, stands up to read, and is handed the scroll of Isaiah. He unrolls it to what we call Isaiah 61, and reads, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And then he stops mid-sentence. The next phrase in Isaiah 61 is, "And the day of vengeance of our God." Jesus reads up to favor and closes the scroll. He includes the mercy. He omits the judgment. That editorial choice is not a mistake. It is a declaration about what season has arrived. He hands the scroll to the attendant and sits down. Every eye in the room is fixed on him, and he says 7 words that split the room in half. "Today, this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." Not "this will be fulfilled one day." Not "God is working toward this today." Present tense. In your hearing. Right now. In this room. While you are sitting in these seats. The same SEMERON from the angel's announcement to the shepherds, now on the lips of Jesus himself. He is claiming that the ancient prophecy of Isaiah, the one Israel had been waiting centuries to see, is not a future event anymore. It has become a present reality. The hometown crowd loved it at first. Then Jesus reminded them that God had sent Elijah to a Gentile widow and Elisha to a Syrian leper, bypassing Israelites who were just as needy. The implication was sharp. God's today does not respect the borders you have drawn around it, and they tried to throw him off a cliff. Now pause and look at the progression Luke is building. The first today went to shepherds, outsiders. The second today went to a hometown synagogue, insiders who rejected it. Each time, the circle of who receives God's rescue is being stretched wider. But Luke is not finished. The third SEMERON lands in Luke chapter 19, and the recipient is the most unexpected one yet. His name is Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector in Jericho. In first-century Palestine, tax collectors were not government employees filling out forms. They were local men who had purchased the right to collect Roman taxes from their own neighbors, and whatever they collected above the required amount, they kept. The system was designed for corruption. Chief tax collectors sat at the top of the corruption chain. Zacchaeus was rich. He was also despised by virtually everyone who knew him. Luke records that Zacchaeus wanted to see Jesus, but could not, because he was short and the crowd was thick. So this wealthy, powerful man did something absurd. He ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree. A grown man, a man of status, scrambling up a tree like a child. Whatever was pulling him toward Jesus was stronger than his dignity. Jesus reached the spot, looked up, and said something no one expected. "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." This is the only recorded instance in the Gospels where Jesus invited himself to someone's home. He did not wait for an invitation. He did not ask permission. He called a man by name and announced that he was coming in. The crowd muttered, "He has gone to be the guest of a man who is a sinner." But something happened inside that house. Zacchaeus stood up and said, "Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold." Nobody told him to do this. Nobody handed him a checklist. The encounter with Jesus produced a response that came from inside out. And then Jesus spoke the third SEMERON. "Today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." Today, before he had paid anyone back, before the community had time to weigh his sincerity, salvation arrived at his door before any of that was finished. It arrived the moment Jesus walked in. And then Luke places the fourth and final SEMERON. It is spoken from the cross. Two criminals are crucified alongside Jesus. One mocks him, the other turns and says, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus answers, "Truly, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." In paradise. Look at the progression across the entire gospel. Shepherds in a field, a synagogue congregation that tried to kill him, a corrupt tax collector, a dying criminal. Each today reaches someone with less qualification than the last. By the final one, there is nothing left. The man has no time to reform, no opportunity to serve, no way to prove anything at all, just a request and a promise. And the word that meets him is today. Luke is building toward a single conclusion, and it is the same conclusion in every scene. God's rescue does not arrive as a reward for the prepared. It arrives as a gift for the present. If you are here right now, in whatever condition you are in, the word is SEMERON, today. That thread of immediacy runs alongside another feature of Luke's gospel that reinforces the same message, and it shows up in the stories Luke chose to preserve that no other gospel writer recorded. Luke chapter 15 contains 3 parables told back to back. A shepherd loses 1 sheep out of 100 and leaves the 99 to go find it. A woman loses 1 coin out of 10 and sweeps the entire house until she finds it. A father loses a son who demands his inheritance early, wastes it, and comes crawling back from a pig farm. All 3 are unique to Luke. No other gospel includes them, and all 3 answer the same question, a question the Pharisees had asked out loud at the beginning of the chapter. This man receives sinners and eats with them. The parables are Jesus' response, and the response is not a defense. It is a description of God's character. God is the shepherd who goes after the one. God is the woman who refuses to stop searching. God is the father who sees his son while he was still a long way off and runs to meet him. In every story, the one doing the finding is God. The lost sheep does not navigate home. The lost coin does not roll back into the purse. Even the lost son only came to himself after everything else had failed. The initiative belongs to the searcher, not the searched for. These are not the only parables unique to Luke. The Good Samaritan is only in Luke. So is the story of the rich man and Lazarus. So is the Pharisee and the tax collector praying in the temple. So is the persistent widow. Every one of them centers on the same fault line: who gets in and who is left standing outside. And in every case, the answer overturns expectation. The Samaritan, not the priest, is the neighbor. The tax collector, not the Pharisee, goes home justified. The beggar, not the wealthy man, ends up in Abraham's bosom. Luke did not collect these stories at random. He selected them because they prove his thesis. The God of Israel is not rationing his mercy. He is running with it toward the last people anyone would expect. But Luke does something else that most readers miss. He embeds his thesis in the very architecture of his genealogy. and you have to set it next to Matthew's to see what he is doing. Matthew opens his gospel with a family tree that traces Jesus' lineage from Abraham forward, through David to Joseph. It is a Jewish genealogy for a Jewish audience, proving that Jesus is the rightful heir to the promises God made to Israel. It starts with the father of the nation and works its way down. And Luke does the opposite. His genealogy appears in chapter 3, after Jesus' baptism, and it runs backward. It starts with Jesus and works in reverse, past David, past Abraham, past Noah, all the way back to Adam, the Son of God. The placement matters. Matthew puts the genealogy at the front door of his gospel before anything happens. Luke puts his after the baptism, after the voice from heaven has already declared, "You are my beloved Son. In you I am well pleased." The identity comes first. The lineage follows. Luke is saying, this is not a man trying to prove his credentials. This is a man whose identity has already been confirmed by the Father. And that final phrase, Adam, the Son of God, is doing enormous theological work. By tracing the line to Adam, Luke is making a claim that goes beyond Israel. This is not just the Jewish Messiah. This is the second Adam, the one who came for the entire human race. The rescue is as old as the species. Matthew's genealogy says Jesus belongs to Israel. Luke's genealogy says Jesus belongs to everyone, and that fits everything else Luke has been building. The shepherds were outsiders. The Samaritans in his parables were outsiders. Zacchaeus was an outsider. The genealogy traces that pattern all the way back to the first human being and says, from the very start, nobody was outside the scope of this. Now Luke adds one more structural layer to his argument. Between chapters 9 and 19, he constructs something that scholars call the travel narrative. Roughly 10 chapters of material, much of it found only in Luke, all set within the framework of Jesus walking toward Jerusalem. The section opens with a line that carries more weight in Greek than most English translations convey. Luke 9:51 says Jesus set his face to go to Jerusalem. The Greek phrase carries a sense of hardened resolve, of deliberate, irreversible commitment. He is not wandering in that direction. He is locked in. And for the next 10 chapters, as he teaches and heals and confronts and weeps, every step is moving toward the cross. Luke reminds you of this repeatedly. He went on his way through towns and villages, teaching and journeying toward Jerusalem. On the way to Jerusalem, see, we are going up to Jerusalem. The repetition is not accidental. Luke wants you to feel the weight of each step. Every parable Jesus tells during this stretch is a parable told by a man who knows he is walking toward his own death, and most of Luke's unique content is embedded in this section. The Good Samaritan, the prodigal son, Mary and Martha, the rich fool, the narrow door, the cost of discipleship, the 10 lepers. Luke packs his most distinctive material into the journey so that you understand these teachings are not abstractions. They are the final instructions of someone who does not have unlimited time left. The road to Jerusalem gives every word an urgency it would not carry in a different setting. But the journey does not happen in a vacuum. Luke makes sure you see who is powering it. He mentions the Holy Spirit more than any other gospel writer, and the references start before Jesus is even born. The Spirit fills Elizabeth when she greets Mary. The Spirit rests on Simeon and leads him to the temple. At the exact moment Joseph and Mary bring the infant Jesus, the Spirit descends on Jesus at his baptism and drives him into the wilderness. And when Jesus returns and enters that synagogue in Nazareth, his first public words are, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me." Luke is tracing online. The same Spirit who filled the prophets and guided the faithful remnant of Israel has now come to rest on this one man. And what Jesus promises at the end of the gospel, "I am sending the promise of my Father upon you," is what Luke records arriving in Acts chapter 2. The Spirit that empowered Jesus' ministry is poured out on his followers. Luke sees the entire story as Spirit-driven, from the first chapter of his gospel to the last chapter of Acts. One continuous movement of God reaching into the world through his people. And then there are the women. Luke records more about women in the life of Jesus than any other gospel writer, and the pattern is too consistent to be coincidence. Elizabeth and Mary dominate the opening chapters. Anna, the prophetess, speaks over the infant Jesus. In the temple, the widow of Nain receives her dead son back to life. The sinful woman who washes Jesus' feet with her tears, Mary and Martha, with their contrasting responses to Jesus, the women who financially supported Jesus' ministry, named in Luke chapter 8 and mentioned nowhere else, the bent-over woman healed on the Sabbath. In a world where women could not serve as legal witnesses, Luke builds an account in which women are among the most faithful, most perceptive figures in the story. They give, they listen, they stay at the cross when others have fled. They arrive first at the empty tomb, and Luke does the same with the poor. In the Mary's song, the Magnificat sets the tone before Jesus is even born. He has filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he has sent away empty. That is not a political slogan. It is a description of how God operates. This attention to the overlooked, shepherds, women, Gentiles, tax collectors, lepers, the poor, the criminal on the cross, is not a side theme. It is the thesis. Luke is writing about a God who goes looking for the people everyone else has walked past. Every detail he selects reinforces that single claim, and everything Luke has been building, the today thread, the lost parables, the genealogy, the overlooked people, converges in a single verse, Luke 19:10. Jesus has just spoken the word today over Zacchaeus' house, and then he explains why he is there at all. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Two Greek verbs carry the entire weight. The first is ZETEO, translated seek. This is not passive availability. ZETEO describes active, deliberate searching. It is the same word used for the shepherd searching for the lost sheep, the woman searching for the lost coin. The verb implies effort, intention, movement. God does not post a sign and wait for people to find him. He gets up and goes. The second verb is SOZO, translated save, and what makes this word unusual is its range. In the Gospels, SOZO is used for 3 different kinds of rescue. It describes deliverance from physical disease. When the woman with the issue of blood touches Jesus' garment, and he says, "Your faith has saved," to you, it describes rescue from mortal danger. When the disciples cry out in the storm and beg Jesus to save them, and it describes spiritual salvation. When Jesus tells Zacchaeus that salvation has come to his house, Luke uses all 3 meanings across his gospel, and he does it on purpose, because in Luke's understanding, the rescue Jesus brings is not limited to one category. It touches the body, it touches the circumstances, it touches the soul. SOZO covers the whole person. Luke, the physician, would have understood that instinctively. A doctor does not treat a symptom and ignore the patient. Neither does the Savior. So here is the cipher Luke has been building from the very first page. ZETEO, the seeking. SOZO, the saving. SEMERON, the today. 3 words that form a single pattern. God is actively, deliberately searching. His rescue covers every part of you, and it is offered in the present tense, today, to people with less and less qualification, until, at the cross, there is nothing left but a request and a promise. And Luke gives you one more scene, found only in his gospel, that pulls every thread together. After the resurrection, 2 of Jesus' followers are walking from Jerusalem to a village called Emmaus. About 7 miles away, they are crushed, their faces are downcast. Everything they had hoped for seems to have died on Friday. And as they walk, a stranger joins them on the road. They do not recognize him. He asks what they are talking about. They pour out the story, the trial, the crucifixion, the rumors from the women who found the tomb empty, and then the stranger does something unexpected. Beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. He walks them through the entire Hebrew Bible and shows them that every page had been pointing to this. They still do not recognize him, but something is happening inside them that they will only be able to name later. When they reach Emmaus, they ask him to stay. He sits at the table, takes bread, blesses it, breaks it, and in that instant their eyes were opened. They recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. Did not our hearts burn within us while he talked with us on the road, while he opened to us the scriptures they had been walking away from? Jerusalem, away from the community, away from the place where everything had happened. And the risen Christ came and walked their direction. He did not stand in Jerusalem and call them back. He caught up to them on the road they had chosen and turned it into holy ground. And once they recognized him, they got up that same hour and ran back to Jerusalem to tell the others. The two who had been walking away became the two who ran back. That is what happens when the seeking God finds you. Luke began his gospel by telling Theophilus he could have certainty, asphaleia, ground that will not shift. And then he spent 24 chapters showing what that certainty rests on. Not on human goodness, not on religious performance, not on social standing or ethnic heritage or moral track record. It rests on a God who came looking, a God who announced today to shepherds who could not testify in court, who declared today in a synagogue to people who wanted to kill him for it, who walked uninvited into the home of the most hated man in Jericho, and said today, who hung on a cross gasping for air, and spoke today to a man who had nothing left but a request. Luke 19:10 is not just the thesis of this gospel, it is the thesis of the entire Bible. The Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. He came looking. He is still looking. And the word on his lips has not changed. SEMERON. Today, if this opened the Gospel of Luke for you in a way you have never seen before, subscribe and turn on notifications. We decode a new biblical pattern every single week. Drop one word in the comments, even just the word today. It helps this reach someone who needs to know God is still looking for them. Share this with a person who has been wondering whether God still has a today for them. And may the God who called Zacchaeus by name know yours just as well and find you right where you are.